Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have said on this platform many times that constitutional amendment number 3 is a decoy. Today, I'd like to focus on why it is a decoy from the perspective of Zau PF, opposition, and the ordinary Zimbabweans. A quick summary is amendment number 3 seeks to extend Mnangagwa's stay in office beyond 2028. Within Zau PF, this is a big issue because, of course, there are always those who are also aspiring to be the top dog. So this is the equivalent of the baboons fighting amongst themselves. But the most significant one is that amendment number 3 seeks to extend, to increase Zau PF as a party, its iron grip on power. Everyone in Zau PF knows that Zau PF has lost the support of the ordinary people. The party cannot afford the luxury of holding a free, fair, and credible election. It's as simple as that. So anything that stops any meaningful implementation of the democratic reforms is more than welcome by everyone concerned. And this amendment seeks to give additional dictatorial powers to the regime, to the party. And therefore, then in that regard, everyone in Zau PF welcomes this amendment number 3. But the other equally important reason is that amendment number 3 is taking the spotlight away from the fact that Zau PF has never held free, fair, and credible elections. And that going to the next election without any meaningful reforms will only mean Zau PF will rig those elections. So amendment number 3 is a useful decoy, drawing attention away from rigged elections in the past and the fact that future elections without reforms, the party will rig them. This is the equivalent of the baboons uniting and fighting as one. Thank you very much. Welcome to the program, Ben.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. Now, I've always said, once we identify our main problem or shortcoming as a nation, we can then formulate a way forward. For far too long, we have been dealing with sideshows. You know, you got the 2030 amendment, this one that has just come up. Previously, we had the Geza movement where Chiwenga is now better than, Mnangagwa. Then 2023, we had Chamisa bragging that, God is in it, he can win rigged elections. It goes as far back as when the country got its independence. We have been dealing with sideshows. But the main problem that has always been spoken about and we have systematically ignored is the fact that Zimbabwe, since in 1980, has never had free, fair, and credible elections. And that is a fact. This whole other drama that is coming is because of that. Zanu PF wanting to change the constitution and to change the ways of how they usually rig elections is why they came up with this 2030 thing. So for me, I think whether you want to stop 2030, it does not change the fact that whatever comes after that will be rigged elections. And that is the problem that we need to face up to and fix.
I'd like to play this video clip of Tendai BT and his group launching the so-called Constitution Defense Forum. In this clip, we'll hear one of the war veterans speak.
In the pursuit of the freedom that the current regime is seeking to mutilate. I will not say much, but I will hand over to Comrade Zulu, a decorated freedom fighter, who shall say a few words.
This records conversations better than taking notes ever could. This is Pocket, an AI note taker that records conversations.
Sorry about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Zimbabwe. My name is Comrade Ruben Zulu. I'm speaking on behalf of war veterans who went to war for the liberation of Zimbabwe. To my left, I've got other comrades who have come, who have managed to come. Some wanted to come, but they couldn't because of the disturbances. They were being, the police were at the venue where we are supposed to have the venue. I've got Comrade Ndia, Knowledge, Digmo Ndia, and further to my left is Comrade Elfas Kawa. These are all veterans. And we always say that we are going to we defend the Constitution. We went to war to fight for one man, one vote. We went to war to fight for Zimbabwe, for everyone, for the land, and for people to be able to choose their leaders. And as such, we find that now there is this amendment bill number 3 that is coming, where we have the president is chairing the cabinet to gazette the bill himself, and without even consulting the people, when the Constitution clearly states that we should have 2 referendums for the president to be able to amend the Constitution and for him to be able to benefit as an incumbent who is there now. The Constitution says he cannot without a referendum from the people. So this is what we are saying. And we are saying that all over the country, people should be able to express vachitaura zvavanofunga nezvebill ireri, vataure vanhu, not parliament, the few who are in parliament. Those people vari kuitira for their own benefit. Now, we don't want that. We want vanhu vataure vega, vataure ivo vanhu kuti no, tiri kuda referendum iyoyo kana kuti hatisi.
I'll stop it there. I think it is important here that 46 years since our independence in 1980, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. As much as this constitutional amendment is seeking to curtail the people's rights to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, we must also point out that the last 46 years, the nation has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That is just as much, if not worse, a constitutional crisis than what the amendment is seeking. I think it is completely misleading to start pretending that somehow whatever the mischief the new amendment is proposing is worse than what we have been facing all along. Zimbabwe is a failed state because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That is a fundamental truth. That is the reality that we have got to admit. Zau PF has been very good at doing the serious stuff, i.e. the vote rigging, under cover of darkness. And then during the day, come up with something that will occupy the people's mind. Take the attention away from the serious business of the rigged elections. I'll give you one example of that. In the period 2000 to 2015, there was the farm invasion. Zau PF drummed up the issue of white farm invasion every time we get into the elections. And to make sure that the farm issue was the one on the table and the issue of rigged elections was completely forgotten, the party would inspire its Jambanja thugs to carry out the farm invasion and pump up the volume by beating up the white farmers and their workers, in some cases even killing some of them, and burning property. It has been impossible for the nation to talk of, we want the voters' roll to be inspected before the elections, when the next story is one of a whole farm being burned down. The violence was such that the issue of a clean voters' roll somehow faded into insignificance. That is exactly what Zau PF wanted to happen. And it is the same idea with this amendment. I'm interested to hear from people like the war veterans. Are they all of a sudden aware that the people of Zimbabwe have been denied the vote. He talked of one man, one vote. As the people of Zimbabwe enjoyed that right up to now, and that the amendment is seeking to take away that right? Of course not. Zau PF has denied the people's right to one man, one vote. All along. And that is the point. In this particular instance, the issue of let's forget about what happened in the past. We must defend the Constitution, the right to one man, one vote. You're defending it now, but you've never defended it before. That is the problem. We have to face up to that political reality.
I think, we can spend eternity dealing with the side shows that Zau PF will always bring up to get our attention off, the important stuff. And I think it's gotten to a point where we have now accepted that Zau PF can rig elections. It's okay. But somehow we ourselves have to come up with strategies of how to stop it. Which, it's nonsensical. Look, first of all, even when you want to go into an election, the process is so flawed that ZEC itself is Zau PF children. The voters' roll. You can make heads or tails of what is in there. The people that are alive today will find their names are not there. But for sure, the dead, their names are there. You may be put in a different constituency, but the dead will be in the right constituency. And these are just the few irregularities that I can bring up. We could go the whole day, raw, voters being intimidated, coerced, forced. Everything. And again, I say, the main problem that we are facing in Zimbabwe is our inability to hold free, fair, and credible elections, where we can actually choose a government that is for the people and by the people. Period. We could, like I said, we could spend the whole day bringing out the historical facts, the books, of everything. And I believe that even the opposition themselves, they have at least at one point testified that the biggest problem is how flawed our election process is. And this has given birth to this whole 2030 amendment, nonsense. Zau PF has been pressurized and has been warned. You cannot continue rigging elections the way you are doing. They have been told by the international bodies and international community, you cannot continue doing this. Now they are trying to come up with another mechanism of how do we then rig. That jig of ours has been caught out. So this is just a way of them, adapting to the situation. But this is not going to stop them. So in as much as you will try and fight and stop amendment, they could simply just come up with another way. What we need to fight and stop is the rigging of elections. We have to demand for reforms. That way we have a clean, clear path. What is being done, by who, when, and how. That is what Zimbabwe needs. We will spend, I am telling you, we will spend the whole day. Zau PF gives us something to run with, we run with it. He gives us another, we run with it. And forget the primary cause of our problem, the primary cause of why Zimbabwe is a failed state, the inability to hold free, fair, and credible elections.
I've said that amendment number 3 is a decoy. If we were to turn back the clock to the end of 2023 elections, SADC and the AU and every other respectable election observer of the 2023 elections condemned the process as flawed and illegal. Mnangagwa, when he saw the SADC and the AU reports condemning those processes, his reaction was typical.
Vana vakatuka Zau PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti Zau PF yakaipa, farai. You are doing great things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu, kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anofamba zvakanaka, ndezvavo.
The truth of the matter is, when SADC and the AU condemned Zimbabwe's election, Mnangagwa was stung. He was dismissing them here as detractors. But he had to do more than that. He knew that he had to take the sting out of that verdict. And what better way of doing so than have a decoy? The people of Zimbabwe were outraged by the fact that the elections were rigged. But they will even be more outraged if Mnangagwa was to turn around and say, I intend to extend my stay in office beyond even the 2028. And people jumped at that. So instead of people concentrating on the elections were rigged and applying the pressure that we want a legitimate government, not an illegitimate government. And even more urgently, to apply the pressure to make sure that that does not repeat itself ever again. This is the mistake we've been making all along. We hold the elections. We find ourselves that the process was flawed, but do nothing. Next election, history repeats itself. So our number one priority would have been, we must make sure that this does not happen again. But by throwing in onto the national agenda the proposal that he intends to stay beyond even the 2028, made people forget that he is illegitimate, and also forget that the regime is not implementing any reforms to ensure future elections are free, fair, and credible. This is why I keep saying that the ED 2030 agenda, which has since morphed into this amendment number 3, is a decoy. In the picture there, you can see wooden ducks. They're decoys. They'll be put onto the side of a pond. And as ducks fly, they see them and they think it is a safe place. Those must be other ducks as well, contentedly feeding, and they'll join them. And the hunter will be waiting. That is what a decoy is. And in the case of Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa has used ED 2030 agenda, and now this amendment number 3 as a decoy. The people have gone for have believed the decoy and taken their attention away from what really is the important thing, making sure elections are free, fair, and credible. And when you're talking of 46 years of rigged elections, that's when you begin to realize that this is a serious problem and we really need to address it.
It's quite disappointing that, the so-called intellectuals have been very slow to realize and to identify the decoys that Zanu PF has been giving. Actually, they are the ones that are always making noise about it. And yet they should be the ones to know the primary cause of our problems. We keep going round and round in circles. And sometimes we even choose the most dangerous alternatives, the most ridiculous alternatives out there. And yet we have been given, the answer. Zimbabwe has been given the answer. We have been given the answer. And we have failed to write down our corrections. Instead, we have chosen ridiculous strategies, ridiculous methods, even ridiculous assumptions. Assumptions like Chiwenga will be the best foot forward. Chiwenga is a better candidate. Yet his track record says otherwise. So I think, unless we put our act together, I don't see us coming out of this hellhole anytime soon. I believe we have already wasted a good opportunity that was presented in 2023 when SADC tightened the screw on Zanu PF. We let that opportunity slip away. And there is absolutely nothing SADC could do, because we had granted ZANU PF legitimacy. we had okayed the process when Triple C MPs took up positions of office. And now we are here fighting for an amendment, a violation of the Constitution. The Constitution has always been violated. The likes of Tendai Biti and Lovemo Maduku, they have been part and parcel of the violation. Now they're only offended because they are not getting anything out of it. But had they been getting something out of it, they would have stood up and supported. It is unfortunate that the intellectuals, I cannot blame those that would not have understood what is going on. Millions out there, they do not understand. But those that actually understand have accepted this, as number one priority. We will live in the mountains for it. But when elections are being rigged, and SADC actually quoted and said the elections are a violation of the Constitution, none of them wanted to go and live in the mountains for that. It's very, very sad that the intellectuals are the ones that are manipulating the rest of the Zimbabweans, the ordinary Zimbabweans out there.
I've said that amendment number 3 seeks a whole variety of things. The number one thing is to extend Mnangagwa's stay in office. There are people within Zau PF, of course, who see that as unacceptable because they too want to be the top dog. This is the part where the baboons are fighting among themselves. But if you look at all the other proposed changes in the amendment number 3, Zau PF cronies are not against it. They know that Zau PF has been unpopular with the people of Zimbabwe. The party cannot afford to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so there are a number of aspects to be considered there. The first one is that the changes that the amendment is seeking will only further consolidate Zau PF's stranglehold on power. The second point is people should appreciate that as much as it is strengthening Zau PF's hand, Zau PF does not need its hand strengthened. They've been able to rig elections without amendment number 3 these last 46 years. So there is another third aspect, and this is that amendment number 3 is a decoy. It's drawing people's attention away from the rigged elections. Even if amendment number 3 is not implemented, it has served its purpose already, in that people have forgotten about implementing the democratic reforms to ensure next elections are free, fair, and credible. In that the last 3 years, hardly anyone has spoken about Zau PF being illegitimate because they rigged the elections. So in that regard, amendment number 3 is serving ZANU PF very well. People should understand that ZANU PF, they are like baboons. They can fight among themselves. But when they face a common threat, they fight as one. Here is a video clip of baboons fighting as one.
Wow! Holy! Holy!
Well, that is what baboons do. When they face a common threat, they fight as one. ZANU PF know that amendment number 3 is helping the party stay in power. So they are all fighting for it, in support of it. And also, they also know that as long as people keep focusing on amendment number 3, ZANU PF's continued stay in power is guaranteed. The tragedy with Zimbabwe is that while ZANU PF knows all those things, the people themselves do not know. For 46 years, people have fallen for the decoy, time and time again. And it has not helped our cause one little bit. I repeat, this amendment number 3 is serving ZANU PF very well, thank you. And that is the truth that the people should realize. We should forget about amendment number 3 and just focus on the main problem, the problem we have had this last 46 years, ZANU PF rigging elections, and making sure that it does not happen again the next time we have elections.
I have to agree with you. Our best foot forward has always and must now be our fight to end the curse of rigged elections. And the good thing I've always said is that we have found favor from the international community. We don't even have to come up with the reforms. All we just have to do is give them the observer mission recommendations. They are the same. And that way, it does not just become our fight. It becomes the international community's fight as well, because they gave them to us. We have roped them in indirectly, such that even if ZANU PF wants to come after us and fight us, they cannot sit down idly, because they gave us that document. They gave us those reforms. If we continue with this current lot that keeps on hopping from any news that come into the spotlight. Today is Chiwenga, we run with it. Tomorrow, 2030, we run with it. We are going to be just blundering from pillar to post until kingdom come. We will not have sold anything. Look at it this way. We are very fortunate enough, let's say, we are very fortunate enough to stop the 2030 and elections go on in 2028 as planned. Of course, Zanu PF is going to rig that election. Whoever their candidate is will take over from there. And most very likely, you will still keep the same crop of individuals within Zanu PF. It's not going to move much. And life will continue the Zanu PF way. Zanu PF is a dictatorship. Whoever is leading Zanu PF is only but one individual that will just continue the dictatorship as it is. Nothing is going to change. We have seen it from Mugabe to the switch over to Mnangagwa. Nothing changed. In fact, it's new ideas of how to tighten the grip on power. How can he make the situation more unbearable for you and I? We need to stop the dictatorship, which is ZANU PF. That is what we must be fighting for. This whole 2030 business is just, it's very, very weird where someone says elections are not free, fair, and credible in Zimbabwe. A fellow Zimbabwean, an opposition member, will say elections are not free, fair, and credible in Zimbabwe. They are so flawed. They are illegal. But then we'll say, we do not want an amendment that will stop us from choosing our president. How have you been choosing a president when the elections have been flawed and illegal? How? Elections in Zimbabwe have always been flawed and illegal, regardless of 2030. That was the problem from the very, very beginning. 1980, when Mugabe declared, if we do not win this election, there will be the continuation of the Bush War. That alone coerced people, forced people to vote ZANU PF just to end the war. And then we know after it became killing, beating, and so forth. It became their DNA. The problem is Zimbabwe's failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Having a leader that is accountable to the people. And by changing or not changing 2030, that will not bring any bearing to the whole mix anyway. We have to go to the primary problem. We have to do the hard work and fix the root of our problem. Then we may move forward as a country.
I've said that amendment number 3 is a decoy. It's a decoy to Mnangagwa and a decoy to the ZANU PF ruling elite. It is also a decoy for the opposition leaders. We have said on this platform, and we'll say it again, that Zimbabwe did have the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have dismantled the Zau PF dictatorship. The golden opportunity was during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. Alas, they failed to implement even one token reform in those 5 years. Mugabe bribed them with the tokens of high office, the E-class Mercedes-Benz for all the deputy ministers, the 2 deputy prime ministers, and Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai himself. And for Morgan Tsvangirai, he was given the US $4 million house. And for most of us, we thought that was the extent of the bribe. But information has started leaking out now that it was even more far-reaching. Tsvangirai and many of the core leaders in MDC received funds from Mugabe regime and other bribes such as cash. And that explains why they failed to implement even one token reform in 5 years. At one time, somebody once asked the Zau PF cronies, why are MDC leaders not implementing any reforms? And the crony boasted that mazwane MDC adziza kuti kaanyerere. MDC leaders are enjoying the trappings of high office. They will not rock the boat. MDC leaders have never denied all these reports of the bribes. Neither have they ever tried to give a rational explanation why they failed to implement even one token reform. In the 26 years they've been on the political platform, including the 5 years in the GNU.
Basi likafira Msango, munhu asina kwaari kuenda bhazi mumu anofara kuti ndo patopumba pake nditori nevamwe vangu pana. Munhu anorwadziwa nekurara Musango munhu ane kumba.
Taibadana kumba kwangu.
But amana kumba kugombezi rangu reria. Mwana so. But munhu asina imba atete kurara Musango. So opposition ino make sure kuti vanhu vaya vaone minda. But may he so rest in peace Tsvangirai. Praise ravo vanga vainaro. Chamisa anaro.
Anaro Chamisa. Ane family.
Kana azoramba. Ndoenda newe.
Riri kupi?
Ane farm.
Ribi.
I know madress munhu anetsa kuti focha but anaro chakudza off camera.
Okay.
Ane mine. Ane makaseo.
Yeah?
Yes. Biti ane praza. Aunomboona ere picture ya Biti achitenga mombe kuna Temba Mliswa. Zikuisa kupraza. One of the biggest beef producers in the Matabeleland region, the Washman Ngwe.
Okay.
Yes, ane praza. Anautenga beneficiary by land reform. But what they did is to discourage their people from acquiring my farms. Because why is that munhu akaona something chapiwa nehurumende achapikisa.
Are you for real, Mr. Ganesha?
Nomubvunza Washman Ngwe kuti haasi kuita beef here, producer beef here paprasa. Ndonyaenderetsana upo ching'ono gore rere. Handiti kuti stand ya upo ching'ono standard ine painogumira. But vakatotaura nehurumende nemasabhuku ikaextendwa because aita god.
So how has this amendment become a decoy for the opposition? Well, like I said, they have failed to explain why they failed to implement even one token reform in 26 years, including the 5 years in the GNU. Not only that, ever since the GNU debacle, they have participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy. David Coulthard has admitted that in his book. And he cannot, and his explanation for why the opposition continued to participate in the flawed elections regardless was that they were doing it out of greed. What is going under at the bottom of your screen there is the full quotation where David Coulthard admits that when he and his friends tried to form a coalition in 2013, they failed to form a coalition. And they realized that the other side would participate in the flawed elections and win the seats. And so they decided they would participate too. So the opposition have been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that participating was going to give Zanu PF legitimacy. But they continued doing so out of greed. They have increasingly become lost political credibility. When Chamisa came up with his pathetic claim that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, only the day after the elections to admit that Zanu PF had rigged the elections, the very thing that he said would not happen. He knew he was losing political credibility. So at the present moment, the opposition needed to come up with something that will give them political credibility. And fighting to stop this amendment has become the holy grail to them. This is why you have the likes of Tendai Biti, as Ben was referring to earlier on, swearing that he will defend or you try to stop amendment number 3 going through.
That is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. It must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to campaign and live in the mountains to get that no vote.
What Ben asked, and rightly so too, is that you had 5 years of the GNU, a golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms, which would have ended the Zanu PF dictatorship, and you wasted them. 5 years. And now you want to tell us that you are prepared to live in the mountains to stop Zanu PF implementing amendment number 3. What is so special about Amendment number 3? Like I said, Amendment number 3 seeks two basic things: to extend Mnangagwa stay in office and to stop people focusing on rigged elections. It's a decoy. The first one, whether the amendment goes through, if they can, Zanu PF rigs the election, we will have a dictator because the dictatorship is assured. It will just be a question of, is it Mnangagwa or somebody else? Just as it was the same similar situation in 2017. Is it Mugabe or is it Mnangagwa? The dictatorship itself was assured. The baboons, the Zanu PF thugs, when it comes to making sure that the Zanu PF dictatorship stays in power, they are united as one. They'll fight over who is going to be the top dog, yes, but they will be fighting as one to make sure that the dictatorship is secure. So Tendai BT is now telling us he and his friends are going to live in the mountains just to decide who is the dictator. They did not pay the same attention to fight to end the dictatorship itself. That is the subtle difference. This is why I say to the opposition, this amendment is a welcome decoy as well.
I agree with you. This brings back the opposition into the picture. They become relevant once again. You know, they had their splits and everything there, and it was clearly a mess. Now they have something to hold on to and to convince millions of people out there. And they're doing so because some people, whoever is, is playing the pipe, people are following. This is what Zimbabweans are doing. When Geza came into the spotlight, he became the main man. Let's follow him, Then he fizzled out, and unfortunately, he's late now. When Chamisa did the same thing, the young guy, regardless of all his lies, televised some of them. He's the guy on the dance floor. Let's follow him. Right up to now, Maduku is the main guy as well. Zimbabweans miss the point, and they miss it by a mile. And I'm glad you brought up and said that it's a welcome event for Zanu PF. And it's a very, very welcomed event for the opposition too. Because now it presents an opportunity to go back to the people and win. Act as if they are sacrificing. Tendai BT says you would live in the mountains. And people want to hear that. But during the GNU, when they were supposed to implement reforms, he did not go in the mountains. He was living in the life. He was enjoying government that he didn't even think about what sacrifices the people that were beaten, that lost their lives during the 2008 rerun. They never thought of their families. And he wants to go and live in the mountains for you now. We have been slow. We have been slow to see that this current opposition that we have is nothing more than a bat that is neither an animal or a bird, that is neither with us nor Zau PF. They play for the winning side. 1 minute they're an animal, the next minute they're a bird. We need to now look for a competent opposition, an opposition that will do what is required. And what is required is to finally end our curse of rigged elections. That is what we need to do. Otherwise, we are going to be looking. They will come. They will come. And we will be just hopping from one individual to the other. And nothing will change. Stop 2030. Zau PF will give you another Zau PF thug. Some will say that thug will be better than this one. That's what we said when when Mnangagwa took over from Mugabe. We sang, we were happy, danced in the streets. Here we are, meeting. How can we get rid of this guy? We need to learn from our mistakes. And the only way we can learn from our mistakes is appreciating and identifying and accepting the fact that we were wrong. We were making huge mistakes, and fix those mistakes. That's the only way out of this. And I always say, if there are no reforms, there shouldn't be any elections, regardless of 2030. There shouldn't be. That should be our fight. That should be what we are striving for. Thank you.
Well, one
state house chitodya chicken in
Kule.
kudya kwako kwakaprofitwa kare nababa John ndokudya kwakanzi sapatina kudya kwakanaka kudya kundirozi tiripo pastate house unogona kutofa usina kumbosvika pastate house
Kutosunungurwa izvozvo kubva.
asi siripo takatotsika mota dzenza urikuona state house ndopatiri pamba penyika kunamata kwakanaka chipostori chakanaka sapatina tichidya zvedu kudya kwakanaka tiri kutodya pamasowe panapa but tiri kudya nyama imi mukwenyu hazviko asi tiri pano pamasowe pastate house nhasi ndo patiri kunamatira nhasi tiri kudya nyama namata mwari uyu akanaka baba Johani wakauya nechinamato ichi kuvanhu vatema wakagona nokuti zvaitwa nevarungu chete asi nhasi uno tisu tiri kuzviita vakana vabvudze popi hatina matei vakomana.
That is the other dimension of where the decoy has worked. The people themselves have been so naive, ignorant, and gullible. It has been easy to con them time and time again. At the beginning of this discussion, we played a clip or the video of the war veteran talking about one man, one vote. If the truth be said, up to this day, millions of our own people out there have no clue what one man, one vote really means. Because if they did, they would have realized that all along they've been shortchanged. They've been sidetracked, drawn into a dead cul-de-sac without knowing it. Opposition supporters, for example, have maintained this personality cult mentality that the likes of Nelson Chamisa have exploited to the full. Opposition members, many of them, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, they will refuse to accept that Chamisa is corrupt, incompetent, a liar, and a conman. Ben referred to that video clip where he was being interviewed by a BBC reporter and clearly shown that he had been lying. And yet he stubbornly maintained that it wasn't him. The truth of the matter is there are some issues which should be settled by now. We should not have even to argue whether Chamisa is corrupt, incompetent, a liar, and a conman. We know that already. We should not be arguing whether Chiwenga is corrupt, incompetent, a murderous thug who rigged the elections and who orchestrated Operation Mafotera Papi in 2008 just to punish people because they had dared to reject Zau PF. We should know by now that he is a thug. And why anyone should be promoting him as the possible replacement as president of the Republic of Zimbabwe beggars belief. But that is where we are wrong as a people. We never seem to learn from the past. And those who do not learn from the past are invariably going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. I believe the greatest tragedy that can happen to Zimbabwe would be for the next elections to take place and Zau PF to blatantly rig those elections and get away with it. And all because the people were focused on amendment number 3, a decoy. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.